Hello, folks. My name is Bob Good, and I'm with Counselor Lizelle Fisher. We're talking today about conflict in marriage, and I wanted to ask you, Lizelle, as a counselor working with couples, what is your approach when it comes to conflict when they are presenting with some kind of irritation or stress in their relationship? Walk me through about what your approach would be.
Sure. So if a couple comes into my office and they are having issues in their communication because there's an increase of conflict, fighting in the home, it's very important for me to understand what are the issues that they're fighting about. Is it money? Is it family? Is it work? And what is it that the arguments are, what happens in the argument? Is it one person attacking the other? Is it one stating a problem and the other not listening? It's very important for me to hear what their communication style is like, and because it's very important when you're breaking down an argument and trying to understand how two people in a marriage communicate with one another, that we learn how to listen as well as voice our concerns and our opinions and our feelings. A lot of times even the couples will start fighting right there when they're talking about the conflicts that go on at home.
Yep.
And that's insightful for me to kind of see the dynamics and how that works out. In some cases I'll let it play out. In some cases I'll take a pause, let's pause right there.
Yep.
What did you hear her say, or what did you hear him say? And sometimes when we kind of have like that extra person there to slow down the fight and allow us to listen to one another, it helps, and it kind of helps us realize, I do hear what you're saying, or I didn't know that you felt that way about it.
Our perceptions at times can really muddle things up when we're talking to people, especially our spouse, our partner, is what we hear and what we see does not necessarily mean what they are trying to tell us. So it sometimes is going through a lot of different filters when people are trying to communicate to one another. I'm thinking of some research that Dr. John Gottman did years ago called the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And there were stages that he articulated. The first stage would be criticism, the next one is defensiveness, the third one is contemptuousness, and finally you've got that withdrawal, that stonewalling effect that takes place.
Yes.
So when you've got a couple that comes in and they're in one of those stages, whether it's criticism or defensiveness, whatever, what do you think are the key aspects of helping the spouses foundationally begin in a baby step to try to listen better to one another? Walk me through that.
Yes, definitely. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are very important to identify in the conflict of a marriage, because it creates that volatile relationship between the two. So anytime I see a couple that, when they're walking me through what a disagreement looks like, or perhaps it goes on in the office, I believe it's very important for me to kind of press a pause button when it occurs and let them know, this is criticism. Let's try not to criticize one another, but how can you tell them without saying, you did this to me, or you hurt me, or, what is it that you're feeling from what had just happened or what that person just said.
Good.
Also in defensiveness, when we're defensive, we don't listen. So, when we can pause again and say, what did you hear that other person say? We kind of break down that little wall and we listen. So that helps decrease the defensiveness, and it allows us to open up our ears to what the other person is saying. Marriage is such a beautiful thing because, when we get married, you go down and you go down the aisle and I plan to live with this person for the rest of my life, and I love this man or woman, and at the time that you just want to do everything that you can to make this work, and life happens, kids, work, stuff happens, and sometimes we forget the freshness of what it was like in the beginning. So when we can bring that back and we can start listening to the other person as we did when we first got married or when we first started dating, we can listen to their concerns or their issues in a new light, almost, because years of experience and life, and so you have a foundation with that spouse in the beginning. So it's always nice and refreshing to kind of regain that.
That's good.
Yes.
Good. Let me step in here for a moment and say that, sometimes our listening skills are not the best because we think we know what that person is supposed to hear. And so it causes us then to stop listening, and we begin to start to interject our points of view, which makes the other person feel dismissed, discounted, disregarded, or just completely alone in the relationship, all because of the fact that the person that is supposed to be listening to us is actually telling us what to do or how to think. And that gets problematic. So what do you do then when you've got a spouse that is saying, wait a minute, I want to interject my thoughts, my feelings. Mm-hmm. What do you do then?
Taking turns, really. If that other person wants to interject with their thoughts or their feelings, yes, by all means, go right ahead. However, if the other person is finished talking, then the next person can speak.
Okay.
We need to learn to not speak over our partner and not interrupt. Yep. Because when we're interrupting, that creates the defensiveness, the stonewalling, then it's gone down another path of you just don't listen to me, mm-hmm. and because they're being interrupted. So really, if it helps. A lot of times, as the communication can progress, if it's necessary to set a timer, I'll talk for 2 minutes and then you can talk for 2 minutes. If there's not that, decent, proper way of allowing the other person to speak, or just saying okay, I'm going to say one thing and then you can say your other thing, mm-hmm. What you want. Right. So it's definitely a learning process, and it can take a lot of time too, because when we're in that relationship or marriage where we're just fighting often, we forget to stop and just listen, or stop and give that other person a chance.
One of the words that you mentioned there was really important to me, and that was the word process. It mm-hmm. takes time for the couple to learn how to be able to communicate in a way that each person feels safe and secure when they're in a communication dialogue with one another. The problem is that sometimes that security has some hinges connected to our family of origin. Mm-hmm. What do you think about family of origin? How does that impact the way that partners may communicate to one another, mm-hmm. from their family of origin, meaning their birth family? How much do you feel that plays a role? Oh,
yes. I think it plays a huge role, because it's really how we learn to communicate in the first place. If you come from a family, and also within that family, what's your birth order? Are you first? Are you middle? Are you the last? Also plays into effect of how we communicate and how we feel we are heard. It comes to even with our parents is where we learn how to communicate.
Yep.
And what is it that we saw in our parents? Did we see our parents communicate well? Did we see our parents communicate in a volatile or toxic manner? And then we carry on what it is that we saw into our relationships growing up. Boyfriends, girlfriends, friendships, and then later on our spouses. If we don't correct them prior, mm-hmm. We definitely carry that on to our marriages.
Yeah. I call it the alien from within, because we in our first time of the relationship, the newness and the novelty is so exciting. The hormones are going left and right. But inside of us is this family of origin piece that we bring into the relationship unbeknownst to ourselves and to our partner. And sometimes the alien comes out in the marriage relationship unbeknownst to us, and one writer called it emotional regression, where the person begins to go backwards as if they were once again a child. They might begin to raise their voice, they might begin to shut down, they might begin to wave their hands all over their arms all over the place, all because of the fact that they're saying to their partner, I'm in distress. And that distress has a lot of connection to how they might have been in distress when they were kiddos. And so I think it's really important that couples understand that many times what they're feeling today has a lot to do with how they might have felt back in the day when they were kids. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
I do. I definitely do. Especially if, we have relationships in our past that we struggle with. We also carry on the hurt from that and the distrust from that into our marriages. And a lot of times it comes out to our spouses as in, can I trust you?
Yep.
Are you there for me? And your spouse is probably feeling like, I'm here for you. I'm here for you every day. I call you, I talk to you. But inside you're feeling like you're going to leave me,
Yep. That feeling of abandonment, or that feeling of being alone, that feeling of being invisible, all of those emotions are inside of us that may stem from our families of origin. Now, we're not here to shame or damn or condemn parents, but we are here to say that it causes us to default back into the day when we were kids. If we're not aware of that as communicators, we might be doing a dance, what I call a fear dance, of uncertainty and a lack of trust to want to be able to be open with that person. So I think that's an important piece, and in the future maybe we can talk more about this whole notion of how does our families play a role in how we communicate today. But when it comes to communicating as couples, there has to be certain guidelines of what we should and shouldn't do when it comes to speaking to one another. So why don't you walk us through with regard to what do you think are some good ideas of what couples shouldn't do when they are communicating? What are some boundaries or off-limit territories they shouldn't delve into? And then we'll fall into what are some positive things we should do.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, a lot of times, I hear couples, like, if you disagree with the other person, they might call you crazy. Oh, you're crazy.
Okay.
And that hurts.
Yeah.
That creates that defensiveness of I can't trust you with my feelings. So I would say name calling, belittling your spouse is definitely something that needs to be off limits.
Okay, name calling, belittling. Okay,
walking away while the other person is speaking. That's pretty hurtful. It lets them know that you don't matter, and I don't care what it is that you have to say, and you don't want your spouse to feel that way. If you are wanting to work on your marriage, you don't want them to ever feel that what they say doesn't matter, or that they are again feeling abandoned or left.
Good. Makes the person feel alone and completely invisible in the relationship. I once talked about with one of my clients about what I call the emotional tasers, where it shuts down the communication, like using the word you. It's like this invisible finger that's pointing into the chest of your partner that says you this and you that. Makes me either want to fight or run away or just simply be like a deer in the headlights and not knowing what to do. That's a very awkward feeling when my partner is using those words, the word you, in the relationship. That's an emotional taser that kind of shuts or paralyzes the relationship. Yeah, and I think now once a couple recognizes that their family of origin plays a role in how they might be communicating, as well as the fact that there are negative ways that we communicate to one another to shut down the relationship, making the relationship feel not secure and safe. Walk us through now, what would be some of the positive ways to speak to one another, and also some positive ways of how to listen, because listening is a skill just as much as speaking. What would you say to a couple with regard to some tools of how to be good speakers and how to be good listeners?
So to be a good speaker, kind of what you had just said about not using you, but taking ownership of what's going on with yourself and how you are feeling. What I heard you say made me feel upset. It made me feel alone. What happened the other day when you made that decision without consulting me, it made me not feel like we were partners. Just taking ownership of what's going on with you.
Inside of you, my feelings, this is how I feel, this is my perception about what just happened. Good.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And, some positives can be, even in communicating like that, the other person is listening. It's like, oh, okay, you've given them a little bit of what's going on inside of you so they can understand, oh, no, I wasn't trying to leave you out of that decision. I see you as my partner. It was just in that moment that I had to do that, but I wanted to come and talk to you about it later.
Okay.
Or something to that effect.
Okay. Something to interject. You said something later. Sometimes it may not be a good time to talk to your partner in that moment because the emotions might be supercharged. So you're saying maybe they might benefit by taking the time out. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So when you're feeling that the intensity of maybe your anger or the heat of the argument in the moment, just take a moment, walk away, and that can allow some space, some air between you two to come back and have those kind of conversations.
Good.
That can really make it a little bit healthier to talk about.
Awesome. So in terms of the communication part, now what about me being a listener? You're my partner and I'm talking, you're talking to me rather. How should I be listening in a way that would be conducive or helpful to the conflict process? What are some ideas of how to be a better listener?
So when your spouse takes a break in what they're saying, so let's say your spouse said, when you made that decision the other day, it made me not feel like we were partners in this. So that person states their concern. Okay. Then you as a listener can say, okay, what I heard you say is that you did not feel that we were partners, that I was considering you as my partner. Repeating what you heard your spouse says validates your partner.
Okay, so rephrasing, restating what I hear you saying type of thing. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
One that I might want to interject is the opportunity to show understanding. Understanding code word is the word curiosity. Help me understand, as I'm listening to you, more about what you're saying, what you're feeling. So I'm going to be asking more questions to you. So restating and understanding, what's a third one of how to be a better listener?
Stating and
restating, understanding. What else should I be doing as a listener when I'm listening to you as my partner? I'm thinking
rephrasing.
Rephrasing. I'm also thinking of something called empathy. Empathy is different than sympathy. Sympathy says, well, at least, you were able to blankety blank. But when I'm showing empathy to you, I am climbing into the water with you to try to understand from your perspective, from your eyes, how that must feel. That's a skill to be learned, and sometimes men have a tendency, and even women have a tendency, to dismiss and discount what the other person is feeling. Right, wrong, or indifferent, empathy says, I need to sit with you and really understand what would it be like if I were you. So I'm thinking empathy should be another one as well in the listening process.
Definitely.
So there you go with the restatement of what I hear you saying sounds to me like. The understanding, I'm going to be more curious in terms of what you're having to say. I want to know more. And then number 3 is maybe I need to probably show empathy to you to understand what your feelings are like as if I were you. Good listening skills require us to be able to take a back seat and allow the other person to have the microphone to talk about what their feelings and thoughts are, even if I may disagree with what you have to say. Mm-hmm. Good. So the end result then, after we go through this process, should look like what in the conflict? What would you say is the final package or the final aspect of what a couple should be experiencing when they work through the tools of these conflict resolution tools? What would you say that would look like?
Yes. Well, a lot of times in the end, the end result is what we hope to see is that they have learned to be more respectful to each other.
Good.
The volume of the argument has gone down.
Okay.
Maybe setting aside time to talk about the issues.
Okay.
If the issue gets heated, knowing when to take that break and being able to practice with each other on how to, okay, I heard you say this. This is how I feel. And really cutting out the you and the names and the walking away and leaving the person. So in the end, just it would really be a closer emotional communication, time to communicate about concerns, because even when we have issues in our marriage, that can really bring us closer together.
Good point. So it's okay to disagree. Mm-hmm. Disagreeing is really important to recognize that that's an opportunity to grow as a couple. So I like that. I really do. So folks, I hope that helps you today, understanding that conflict resolution is inevitable. And we're going to have differences of opinions because of different personalities in that relationship. But there are some do's and don'ts in terms of how to work through conflict. We appreciate the fact that this partner has their opinions and thoughts, but sometimes we are overriding their thoughts and opinions because we think we need to interject our voice, our thoughts, our principles, and our ideas. And sometimes that can feel suffocating in a relationship. So I think those are really important tools, and I really appreciate you folks listening to us, and come back next time as we'll talk about counseling and relationships.